Welcome to the Get Real Podcast, your high-octane boost of full-on reality therapy for personal, business, and investing success with your host, Ron Phillips, because somebody's got to tell it like it is.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Get Real Podcast. Ron Phillips here. Man, there's all kinds of news. I imagine some of this you have heard of. Some of this you might not have heard of. We're going to talk about one of those today. There is a new law in South Carolina that you need to be aware of the laws that are passed, but you also need to be aware of the laws that don't get a whole lot of attention, but are just kind of sitting out there. And there are a lot of those as well. This one has been discussed in different areas of the country for several years. Most of the people who wholesale properties, and in a minute, I'll tell you what that is if you don't know. Most of the people who wholesale properties have been kind of, they haven't been very interested in this law because they didn't think it would ever pass. If you'd asked me, I would have said it probably wouldn't pass either. But in South Carolina, it did. So this new law, it impacts all wholesalers. And wholesaling, if you don't know, is going out and negotiating a contract on a property and then taking that property before you close on it and marketing it to typically a buyer list that you have. But in many cases, and in some states, you can put them directly on the multiple listing service because you have equitable title to the properties. Now, and then you sell the property and you take the difference or the profit in between, right? So let's say you contract the property for 200,000 and you end up selling it to a rehabber for $250,000. You would pocket the difference minus costs. Okay. So that's wholesaling a real estate deal. Now, over the years, there has been a problem as people have been taught about wholesaling, and that is that people would go who have no money, no resources, they would go and put properties under contract and they would market them for sale, and then they wouldn't close on them. They wouldn't find a buyer and they'd leave these people high and dry. Now, that is a problem because it starts to irritate people. When people start to get irritated about things that can potentially make people a substantial amount of money, they tend to complain to legislators and they tend to get people on their side. And then this snowball effect happens. That's what's happened in the wholesaling world. Tons of information products and tons of seminars have been taught on wholesaling, and not all of them are created equal. Let's just be honest about it. There's a lot of people out there who've been teaching people for well over a couple of decades that you get all these weasel clauses in your contract and you don't really have to have any intention of closing the property. You're basically just trying to find someone who will buy it on the other end, and then all is well, right? And that's that's a problem. That has gone on now so long that, well, legislators are involved. And so let me explain what has happened in South Carolina. There's a new law. This actually passed. So this is actually the law here in South Carolina, where I live. So you cannot assign a contract. I guess that's a big piece of this wholesaling is that you assign the contract to another person, and then you take an assignment fee. So you go put a property under contract. You have somebody else who wants it. And so you assign your contract to them for a fee. You take the fee. That is now assigning contracts is okay, but marketing or advertising for a profit is not okay. So this is really interesting because wholesaling in the new law, wholesaling does not refer to the assignment or offering to assign a contractual right to purchase a residential real estate. It's a contract. Okay. It defines it as having a contractual interest in purchasing residential real estate from a property owner, then marketing the property for sale to a different buyer prior to taking legal ownership of the property. Advertising or marketing a real estate owned by another individual or entity with the exception of with the expectation of compensation falls under the definition of a broker and requires licensure. So, what South Carolina did is they said, "Hey, you can't market a property that you don't own with the expectation of making money because that is an actual licensed behavior or activity. You have to be a broker or an agent to be able to do that." Now, that's interesting because there is such a thing as equitable title. And if you have a property under contract, you actually do have equitable title. It's interesting to see how the laws are changing. And that's one of them, man. It just kind of it eliminated equitable title. And this is not unlike what happened with the appraisal. It used to be there were three ways to appraise a home, and they just eliminated two of them. By the stroke of a pen, they eliminated two of them. There's only one left. And that one way is by comparable property. And there's inherent problems with that. That means that the people who are passing these laws, they don't understand the ramifications to the market when they do. And that's what they did with the appraisal laws. Now, assigning a real estate contract in the state of South Carolina is still legal, but you can't market it, which basically eliminates the ability to wholesale a property because in order to get another buyer, you would have to market it. And that's the piece that they are saying is illegal. So you can still put it like I can put a property under contract here in South Carolina and I can say, hey, I'll assign this. It's an assignable deal. I can still assign my contract to somebody else. Right. So if another real estate agent came over and said, "Hey, Ron, we have a client who really likes this property that you have under contract. Doesn't look like you're going to be able to close on it. Would you assign your contract to my buyer?" Still do that. It's still legal. But I can't market that property to that other person without the real estate agent because that's a licensed act. Right. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Now, let's see. Advertising and marketing of real property is to be distinguished from the advertising and marketing of a contractual position in a sales agreement to purchase real estate. An advertisement that markets a contractual position to acquire real property from a person with either equitable or legal title and does not imply, suggest, or support to sell, advertise, or market the underlying property is permissible under the section. So, what I can't do is market the property, which is the only thing that people actually look at to buy. But I can market my interest in a property. I just can't market the property. The law is very, very interesting. In addition to that, it also states that a real estate brokerage firm that provides services to an agency agreement for a client is bound by the duties of loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, reasonable care, diligence, yada, yada, as set forth in this chapter. Pursuant to the aforementioned duties owed to a client, a real estate brokerage firm and its subagents are prohibited from engaging in representing others in or assisting others in the practice of wholesaling. So they've tied the hands of realtors too. So this is a really, really interesting law which basically kills wholesaling in the state of South Carolina. And some people say, well, yeah, but you can just do a same day closing, right? Well, I don't know if you can do a double closing because in order to do that, you would have had to have marketed the property, or otherwise you wouldn't have had the other person to sell it to, and that's illegal. So, really, the only way to market for properties and put them under contract and make money on them is to actually close on the properties. First, take actual title to the properties. And then you actually, since you own them, you can market them. You can market them by yourself. You can market them with a realtor. You can do whatever you want, but you have to close on them first. And that's going to stop a lot of people from wholesale. And wholesaling was the lowest barrier to entry into real estate investing. Almost everybody who taught that, that's why they taught it, because anyone could do it. It doesn't really require a whole lot. I mean, if you wanted to go out there and do a whole bunch of guerrilla marketing that doesn't cost hardly any money, you could do it. And you didn't have to have any money to buy the actual property because you were going to double close it or you were going to assign it. All of that's gone. So I guess there's other ways you could do it. You could do kind of an owner finance agreement with them where you take actual title through either an installment contract or a contract for deed, something that you actually record. You could do it that way. I just think there's probably fewer people who will be open to that as a seller than to have somebody actually put their property under contract to cash them out. So basically, it's going to kill wholesaling. Now, I think there's some positives to this. I really don't like it when the government gets involved in the market because I think there are unintended consequences every single time they do it. But in this instance, I think I always try to find, when the government does something like this, I always try to find, what can a person do then with this new law to make a little bit of lemonade out of lemons? And in this case, I think that people who are well funded, people who have access to good private lenders, and there's a cadre of private lenders who have now entered the market in South Carolina to help people close on these properties so that they can then sell them. That's no longer actually wholesaling, but they can still make money on those properties. Now they're just going to have holding costs. And so there's a whole new subset of lenders in the market here who are doing transactional funding. In other words, it's very short-term funding. Instead of rehab loans, they're actually doing loans for a short period of time so that somebody can sell the property over to a rehabber, which is what they would have done on the assignment before. What I think this does is it's going to eliminate a whole bunch of people out of the market, and it's going to open up the market for the people who have the money to actually close on properties. So rehabbers will not have to compete against all of these people who were in the market, newbies who were offering way too much on properties anyway, tying them up. I think there's a huge opportunity for anybody who actually has the resources and the teams and the infrastructure to be able to actually take these down and potentially renovate them, or who has a ready-made buyer list, cash buyer list, who can take these properties down. So if I were a wholesaler in the state of South Carolina right now, and I didn't have that, I would be out looking for transactional funding and private money to make it so that I could actually close these deals. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, well, who cares, Ron? I don't live in South Carolina. Well, I'm here to tell you it only takes one before other states go, man, that sounds like a really good idea. We've had that problem here. And since we've had that problem here, we're going to do the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, we're going to take it another step further and another step further. And the next state does another step further. Everybody trying to outdo the next state with the impact of their law for their citizens. A couple of takeaways from this. The first one is what I just said. If this affects you, then I would get out there and I would be, if you haven't already, I would be getting funding sources and try to figure out how to pivot my business. Secondly, this should tell every single person who's in the real estate investing world, what you do affects everyone else. So if you act like a douchebag and you think, well, it's no big deal, it's just me, it's not. This has been a couple of decades of douchebags not closing their transactions, hurting people, and now the chickens have come home to roost. That is what has happened. And this applies to all the people out there who are inflating the value of homes over time, who are inflating rents way above market, who are anything you can think of that's negatively impacting. And then you level on top of that, the ability on social media to go out there and brag about it, that's going to impact everyone in the real estate investing world. So if you know somebody who's doing that, please encourage them to stop it, because this is only the start of legislation which will negatively impact real estate investors. So those are my two takeaways on this deal. And if you think this isn't going to impact you in a state outside of South Carolina, you better wake up. It absolutely will. More to come on this too, because there are other laws that will impact that are out there. And they're in the stages that this particular law was just a few years ago, where everybody's going, there's no way this is going to pass. There's no way this is going to happen. And listen, man, South Carolina is not a state that's typical of mixing in the market like this. So if South Carolina's done it, I guarantee you this is moving to a state near you. And the rest of these laws that you hear just kind of an undercurrent about, you better start paying attention to them, because they're going to get a movement behind them. And then they're going to be in some legislators' inbox. And at that point, these are going to become law in some form. So we need to know about them. We need to be active about being against them if they're bad for the community and bad for our community as real estate investors. And typically, I mean, look, they passed that appraisal law to help, but it didn't help. It actually hurt. It's actually still hurting, and it's hurting you, and it's hurting every single other person. It negatively impacted the real estate market for the better part of a decade, held it flat, or caused it to slowly decline when it should have been faster. And the rebound of the real estate market should have been substantially faster than it was. It was artificially held down because of the law passed by the government about appraisals. Every single law passed has an impact. And most of the time, the government does not think through nor have the ability to think through the impact of each one of those. All right. So that's the new law in South Carolina. If you know of a law in your state that is similar, I'd love for you to reach out. Invest@rpcinvest.com. If you have something you'd like us to talk about on the show, let me know. Invest@rpcinvest.com. If you want to invest in real estate, you don't know how, you'd like some help getting started, or you want to expand your portfolio, hit us up. Invest@rpcinvest.com. And until next time, get out there and make something happen.
This has been the Get Real Podcast. To subscribe and for more information, including a list of all episodes, go to getrealestatesuccess.com.